Rodgers will be a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. A one-year deal with the Steelers ahead of next week's veteran mandatory minicamp. We have been waiting for I don't even know how long.
The hallmark of the Pittsburgh Steelers is not stupidity. The fact that we have now spent this much time talking about Aaron damn Rodgers is insane. Stop with Aaron Rodgers. Stop.
Aaron loves to make people think he's a mystery. He's worshipped by football people. He's loved by teammates, and the media can't figure him out, and he does that because it invalidates us.
We have been waiting for this news for over 2 months at this point, and Aaron Rodgers finally made his decision, signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this move is going to shake up the entire AFC. If you think the Russell Wilson, Justin Fields experiment was something for the Pittsburgh Steelers, wait until you hear this. Because in this video, we are covering exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers are getting in Aaron Rodgers on the football field and off the football field. And it all started with the craziest waiting game we've ever seen in NFL history. It's May of 2025, and in a conference room in Pittsburgh, some of the most powerful people in professional sports are sitting around a table, waiting. They've been waiting for months. They've restructured their entire organization around one man's decision. They've passed on quarterbacks in the NFL draft. They've alienated veteran quarterbacks and put their championship window on hold, all for a 41-year-old quarterback who won't even tell them if he wants to play football anymore. That man is Aaron Rodgers, and what's happening in Pittsburgh right now isn't just another free agency story, it's the inevitable conclusion of the most spectacular transformation from football genius to organizational terrorist in NFL history. Because here's what's crazy, we all saw this coming. Every single warning sign was there, every red flag was waving, and somehow we're still shocked that the guy who held Green Bay hostage, destroyed the New York Jets' entire front office, and accused Jimmy Kimmel of being connected to Jeffrey Epstein, and more recently is accusing LeBron James of going to Diddy parties.
You know how many guys were on video saying, ain't no party like a Diddy party? How many people openly talked about being there?
LeBron. Today I'm going to tell you a story that spans 20 years, and by the end you'll realize that the kid who fell to pick number 24 in the 2005 NFL draft was always destined to be the man holding entire NFL franchises hostage without even being under contract. This isn't just about football, this is about watching someone systemically weaponize their talent into a tool for organizational destruction, one psychological manipulation at a time. You know what the worst part of this is? Aaron Rodgers was legitimately one of the greatest quarterbacks who have ever lived. He had everything: the best touchdown to interception ratio in NFL history, multiple MVP awards, a Super Bowl, and the respect of NFL legends. But as you're about to see, none of that mattered when he discovered that chaos was more addictive than championships. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how Aaron Rodgers became the man he is today. But before we get to that, this video is sponsored. Download Prize Picks and use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make a deposit of $5 or more. On top of that, I've been hitting more consistently each and every day, primarily because of my brand new partnership with Fantasy Aces. They have the best plays to give you an edge each and every day, and I'm going to leave a link to their Discord server in the description down below as well. And thank you, Prize Picks, for today's sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Before we dive into the chaos, you need to understand where Aaron Rodgers came from to appreciate just how much psychological damage that draft day did to his brain. Born in Chico, California, Rodgers wasn't some 5-star recruit who had everything handed to him. Aaron had to prove himself at every level, and that chip on his shoulder was exactly what would make him great. On April 23, 2005, Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft. The kid from Cal had an incredible junior season, throwing for over 2,500 passing yards and 24 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions. The only knock on Aaron Rodgers' game was his accuracy, and his throwing mechanics were a little goofy. But every mock draft had him going to the San Francisco 49ers with the #1 pick in the NFL draft, his hometown team. This was supposed to be the perfect fairy tale ending, but it ended in disaster. Instead, Aaron Rodgers sat in the green room at Madison Square Garden for what felt like an eternity, watching his dreams crumble in real time on national television. The 49ers took Alex Smith. The Miami Dolphins passed on him for Ronnie Brown, a running back. Even the Cleveland Browns, who historically have a reputation of making incredible decisions on draft day, opted to select Braylon Edwards instead of him. And here's where the Aaron Rodgers story really begins. Not with his first touchdown pass, but with his first taste of organizational betrayal. because every single hostage situation, every conspiracy theory, every retirement fake out that would follow can be traced back to this moment when 23 teams told Aaron Rodgers that he wasn't good enough. By the time Rodgers finally heard his name called by the Green Bay Packers at pick 24, something had fundamentally changed inside of him. You could see it in his face as he walked across that stage. This wasn't relief, it was the birth of a grudge that would fuel the next 2 decades of psychological warfare against NFL front offices. But for now, Aaron Rodgers just said this: "I definitely have a lot to prove." But what he really developed that night wasn't just motivation, it was a victim complex that would manifest in increasingly destructive ways. The COVID lies, the coach assassinations, the retirement manipulation that's currently paralyzing the Pittsburgh Steelers. They all trace back to this moment when Aaron Rodgers decided that the world owed him something. The numbers made his slide even more baffling. In his final college season, Aaron Rodgers completed 66.1% of his passes, which was elite for that era. Compare that to Alex Smith's 67.5% completion rate, and you kind of understand why Aaron Rodgers spent the next 15 years playing with a chip on his shoulder. But here's what nobody realized at the time. Aaron Rodgers wasn't just being drafted by Green Bay, he was being programmed. This rejection would teach him that organizations couldn't be trusted, that he needed leverage to get what he deserved, and that sometimes the threat of leaving was more powerful than actually staying. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are currently learning this lesson the hard way. And here's where the Aaron Rodgers story gets his first taste of the psychological warfare that would define his career. He wasn't just drafted by the Green Bay Packers to play quarterback. He was drafted to eventually replace Brett Favre, a 3-time MVP and Super Bowl champion who is widely considered to be as one of the greatest human beings that has ever graced this earth. Okay, that may have been some sarcasm, but Brett Favre had zero intention of retiring anytime soon. For 3 seasons, Aaron Rodgers sat on the bench, watching one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time while knowing that every Packers fan saw him as an expensive backup. But what nobody realized was that Aaron Rodgers was getting a masterclass in leverage manipulation from one of the greatest practitioners in NFL history. Every move that Favre made, every retirement threat, every dramatic comeback, Rodgers was taking notes. And those notes would eventually become the playbook that's currently torturing the Pittsburgh Steelers. When Favre finally retired in March of 2008, only to change his mind months later and demand to come back, Rodgers found himself in the middle of one of the most dramatic quarterback controversies in NFL history. The Packers had already committed to Rodgers as their starter, but Favre wanted his job back. It was organizational chaos, and it gave Rodgers his first taste of what it was like to be at the center of a media circus. The way the Packers handled it was brutal but necessary. They traded Favre to the New York Jets and handed the keys to Aaron Rodgers. Looking back, you can draw a direct line from this experience to Rodgers' current behavior. He learned that retiring and unretiring could be used as leverage, that creating drama gets you attention, and that sometimes the threat of leaving is more powerful than actually leaving. This is the Brett Favre playbook, and Aaron Rodgers has been running variations of it for 15 years. The only difference is that Favre eventually found teams willing to call his bluff. But there was something else that Rodgers learned during those years on the bench, and that was patience. He learned how to wait, how to watch, how to study not just defenses but organizational psychology. When you spend 3 years observing how power works in an NFL franchise, you start to understand which buttons to push to get exactly what you want. And now let's talk about why this story is so tragic. Because Aaron Rodgers was absolutely incredible at football. When he finally got his chance to start in 2008, he didn't just replace Brett Favre, he surpassed him. In 2010, Rodgers threw for 3,922 yards and 28 touchdowns with just 11 interceptions. The next year, he was even better, 4,643 passing yards, 45 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, and a 122.5 passer rating that led the Green Bay Packers to a Super Bowl championship. But here's where we see the first signs of the psychological patterns that would later destroy multiple franchises. Even during his peak years, Rodgers was learning that individual brilliance could be used as leverage against organizational authority. From 2011 to 2014, Aaron Rodgers was putting up video game numbers. His touchdown to interception ratio over that time span was absolutely ridiculous. But success, especially when it comes this easy and this complete, has a way of warping people's relationship with authority. And Aaron Rodgers was about to learn that being irreplaceable gives you power over people who used to have power over you. The Packers reached the playoffs in 3 of Rodgers' first 4 seasons as a starter, winning the Super Bowl in 2011 2011 and coming painfully close to more championships. This was a quarterback who could make throws that defied physics, extend plays that should have been sacks, and turn broken coverage into touchdown celebrations. Looking back now, those images of Rodgers hoisting the Lombardi trophy, celebrating with teammates who genuinely loved playing with him, feel like the peak of the mountain, because what goes up, especially when you start believing your own hype, eventually comes crashing down in the most spectacular way possible. The scary part was even during these incredible years, Rodgers was developing the intellectual arrogance that would later make him believe he knew more than medical experts, more than coaches, and more than entire organizations. When you're that good at one thing, it's easy to convince yourself that you're smart about everything. By 2014, Aaron Rodgers had established himself as one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. He'd won a Super Bowl, an MVP award, and had been to 4 straight playoff appearances. But behind the scenes, his relationship with head coach Mike McCarthy was slowly deteriorating into one of the most toxic player-coach dynamics in recent memory. And this is where we see the first successful field test of Aaron Rodgers' organizational manipulation tactics, a preview of the chaos that would later consume the Jets and is currently paralyzing the Pittsburgh Steelers. The problem started with philosophical differences about offensive play calling. Mike McCarthy preferred a conservative, systematic approach that emphasized ball control and efficiency. Rodgers, meanwhile, wanted complete freedom to audible at the line, extend plays with his mobility, and take shots downfield whenever he felt like it. But this wasn't really about football strategy, this was about control. And Aaron Rodgers was beginning to learn that his elite performance gave him the leverage to demand institutional power that traditionally belonged to coaches and front offices. The tension became public during games when cameras would catch Rodgers visibly frustrated on the sideline, throwing his hands up in exasperation or having animated conversations with McCarthy. Body language experts had a field day analyzing their interactions, and it became clear that these two men fundamentally disagreed about who was really running the offense. Here's what makes this relevant to the current Steelers situation. Aaron Rodgers learned that he could outlast coaches, that his individual brilliance gave him institutional power, and that organizations would sacrifice coaching stability to keep him happy. Mike Tomlin should be paying very close attention to what happened next. The breaking point came during the 2018 season when the Packers started 4-4-1 and Mike McCarthy was fired mid-season. The first time in franchise history that the Packers fired a coach during the season. While the official reason was philosophical differences, everyone knew what that really meant. Aaron Rodgers officially won his first power struggle. This was Aaron Rodgers' first successful coaching assassination, and it established a precedent that would haunt every coach who worked with him afterward. Robert Saleh learned this lesson the hard way with the New York Jets, even though Aaron Rodgers would vehemently deny it here.
As far as any of the ridiculous allegations out there, in response to it, that I resent any of those accusations because they're patently false. And it's interesting the amount of power that people think that I have, which I don't, but I love Robert, and it was, one of those days yesterday.
And this is something Mike Tomlin is about to discover as well, that signing Aaron Rodgers means constantly looking over your shoulder. The numbers tell the story of their dysfunction. In McCarthy's final 4 seasons, the Packers averaged just 7.75 wins per season, despite having a quarterback who is still playing at an elite level. For comparison, during Rodgers' first 4 seasons as a starter under McCarthy, they averaged 11 wins per season. If you don't run the team exactly how Aaron Rodgers wants it run, he'll make your life miserable until you're gone. And the Steelers better hope that Mike Tomlin is ready for that level of psychological pressure. If you want to understand why Aaron Rodgers has become the NFL's most exhausting drama queen, you'd have to understand what happened on April 23rd, 2020. Exactly 15 years after his own draft day slide, the cycle repeated itself. The Green Bay Packers, with their 36-year-old franchise quarterback coming off of back-to-back 13-win seasons and an NFC Championship game appearance, decided to trade up into the first round to draft another quarterback. This moment didn't just trigger Aaron Rodgers' victim complex, it activated every psychological pattern that had been building since his own draft day rejection. And what happened next would become the template for organizational manipulation that he's currently using on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
With the 26th pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers select Jordan Love, quarterback, Utah State.
The Packers didn't just draft Rodgers as replacement, they traded up to get him, giving away a 4th-round pick in the process. Then to add insult to injury, they used their other picks on A.J. Dillon and Josiah DeGuara, completely ignoring the wide receiver help that Rodgers had been publicly requesting for years. But what the Packers didn't realize was that they just lit the fuse on a psychological time bomb that had been 15 years in the making. The same rejection trauma that created Aaron Rodgers was about to be weaponized against the organization that created it. The 2020 season became a masterclass in passive-aggressive excellence. Rodgers played the best football of his entire career, throwing 48 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions and posting a 121.5 passer rating, which was the 2nd highest single-season rating in NFL history. It was like he was proving a point with every touchdown pass. You want to replace me? Try replacing this. But the real explosion came in the 2021 offseason, and it would become the blueprint for every Aaron Rodgers drama that followed. Just days before the NFL draft, ESPN's Adam Schefter dropped a bombshell.
This is about way more than a contract. This is about Aaron Rodgers not being happy in Green Bay. This is about Aaron Rodgers telling other people he doesn't want to nor plan to go back there again.
The timing wasn't accidental. Aaron Rodgers wanted maximum leverage, and he had learned from watching Brett Favre that there's no better time to create organizational chaos than right before the NFL draft. Sound familiar? Because right now he's using a very similar strategy with Pittsburgh, only he's perfected the technique. What followed was a summer-long standoff that played out like a reality TV show. Aaron Rodgers skipped all voluntary workouts, mandatory minicamp, and didn't show up to training camp until the day before the season started. He held the entire franchise hostage while negotiating not just his contract, but his level of input on personnel decisions and organizational philosophy. Now, this is a very long video, but I want you to get an idea of how truly bizarre this era of Aaron Rodgers' career was. He was pretty much jealous of the type of control that Tom Brady got with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, bringing along Rob Gronkowski, telling the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to sign Antonio Brown, and was frustrated that the Packers didn't consult him on these types of decisions. When he was asked to give an example of said decision, he pointed out to the fact that the Green Bay Packers decided to cut Jake Kumaro the offseason prior, despite him feeling that he was the 2nd best wide receiver during training camp. He then said, maybe run it by me and I can change your mind. At this point, he would also explain himself more on the Pat McAfee show, and that would give us one of the most absurd Aaron Rodgers situations we've ever seen. Just when you thought Aaron Rodgers couldn't create more controversy, the 2021 season brought us what might be his most polarizing moment yet. During a press conference in August of 2021, when asked about his vaccination status, Aaron Rodgers responded with 2 words that would haunt him for months.
Are you vaccinated, and what's your stance on vaccinations?
Yeah, I've been immunized.
Obviously, when you hear this, you assume that Aaron Rodgers meant he was vaccinated against COVID-19, but he wasn't. This wasn't just a lie about vaccines, it was the moment Aaron Rodgers discovered that he could manipulate language to control narratives. And this same technique of saying things that sound definitive but mean nothing would later show up in his dealings with the Steelers, where he's managed to keep them waiting for months without ever actually committing to anything. The truth came out in November when Rodgers tested positive for COVID and was forced to miss a game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Under NFL protocols, unvaccinated players had to quarantine for 10 days, while vaccinated players could return with 2 negative tests. Suddenly, everyone realized that immunized was just Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers. Technically not lying, but certainly not telling the truth either. What followed was a media firestorm that divided the country. Rodgers appeared on the Pat McAfee show and delivered another one of his monologues, this time explaining his decision to remain unvaccinated and his belief in alternative treatments.
Consulted with a now good friend of mine, Joe Rogan, after he got COVID.
This Joe Rogan consultation was crucial because it revealed Aaron Rodgers' attraction to alternative information sources and conspiracy thinking. Keep this in mind because it's about to get much worse. The impact was immediate and measurable. Rodgers missed the Chiefs game, which the Packers lost 13-7, which was their first loss of the season. More importantly, it cost Aaron Rodgers the MVP race, as voters began to factor his availability into their decisions. He still won the award, but the margin was much closer than it should have been given his statistical dominance. But the real damage was to his reputation and relationships within the league. Sponsors started distancing themselves from him. State Farm, his biggest endorsement deal, quietly stopped featuring him in commercials for months. The NFL fined him $14,650 for violating COVID protocols. The controversy revealed something fundamental about Rodgers' psychology, his need to be the smartest person in the room, even when he clearly wasn't. This intellectual arrogance would continue to manifest in increasingly dangerous ways, ultimately leading to public accusations against celebrities and a complete break from reality. But more importantly for our story, this was the moment Aaron Rodgers learned that he could create massive attention and leverage through controversy alone. He didn't need to win games or throw touchdowns to dominate headlines. He just needed to say outrageous things and let the media do the rest. Now, if the COVID controversy showed Rodgers' attraction to conspiracy theories, his feud with Jimmy Kimmel revealed something even more troubling, which was his willingness to make serious accusations without evidence. And this recklessness with serious allegations should have been a massive red flag for any organization considering giving him a platform. The drama started in January of 2024, when Rodgers appeared on the Pat McAfee show and made vague references to celebrities who might be nervous about the release of court documents related to Jeffrey Epstein.
Did you hear about the Epstein client list about to be released too? There's some files that have some names on it that might be getting released pretty soon. Nobody who was involved in the trafficking ever went to jail, so nothing to see here.
While he didn't name anyone specifically, the internet immediately began speculating about who he meant. This is where we see Aaron Rodgers' media manipulation strategy evolve into something genuinely dangerous. He had learned he could create massive controversy through implication and suggestion, letting the internet fill in the blanks while maintaining plausible deniability. On his late night show, Kimmel fired back with typical late night TV mockery. It seemed like harmless entertainment until Aaron Rodgers decided to escalate things. What happened next showed just how far down the conspiracy rabbit hole Aaron Rodgers had fallen, and it should have been a massive warning sign for any team thinking about signing him. A few days later, back on the Pat McAfee show, Aaron Rodgers doubled down with comments that seemed to directly implicate Kimmel in the Epstein scandal.
This has something to do with the Epstein list that came out?
A lot of people, including Jimmy Kimmel, are really hoping that doesn't.
The response was swift and serious. Kimmel's lawyers immediately sent a cease and desist letter, and ABC issued a statement defending their host. Kimmel himself appeared genuinely angry, saying on his show, "I've never met Jeffrey Epstein, I'm not on any list, and Aaron Rodgers is a conspiracy theorist who's been hit in the head way too many times." What made this controversy different was how it revealed Rodgers' willingness to make serious accusations without evidence. This wasn't about football or COVID protocols, this was about potentially destroying someone's reputation with unfounded conspiracy theories. It showed someone whose relationship with reality had become dangerously loose. Even Pat McAfee was getting flack for allowing Aaron Rodgers to say this, starting a beef between ESPN and Jimmy Kimmel. The feud eventually died down when cooler heads prevailed, but it left another stain on Aaron Rodgers' public image. Here was a quarterback who seemed more interested in picking fights with late-night comedians and focusing on winning football games. And this incident perfectly foreshadowed what would happen with the Jets, a player whose focus on off-field controversies and conspiracy theories would completely undermine his on-field performance and destroy an entire organization's stability. In April of 2023, Aaron Rodgers finally got his wish.
At this point, as I sit here, I think since Friday, my intention was to play, and my intention was to play for the New York Jets. My side, love and appreciation, gratitude for everything that Green Bay has done for me.
Rodgers was traded away from the Green Bay Packers to the New York Jets. After months of will he or won't he drama, the Packers sent their franchise quarterback to New York for a package of draft picks that included a conditional first rounder. The Jets, who hadn't made the playoffs since 2010, were convinced that Aaron Rodgers was the missing piece to their championship puzzle. And what they got immediately was nothing short of a disaster. Aaron Rodgers would join the New York Jets, and just 4 snaps into his career, he would tear his Achilles tendon. This was truly tragic because this meant we were going to go an entire season without seeing or hearing from Aaron Rodgers. Or at least that's what you thought. because Aaron Rodgers very quickly hijacked the entire New York Jets season and made it all about him returning from his Achilles tear as quickly as possible, faster than anyone has ever had in NFL history, despite him being older than the average person that gets an Achilles tear, so he could return and be the quarterback for the New York Jets as they valiantly made a run to the Super Bowl. And you think I'm kidding, but each and every week it was an update on Aaron Rodgers could put weight on his leg. Aaron Rodgers is throwing footballs before the game starts. Aaron Rodgers has his cast off. Aaron Rodgers could make a comeback if the Jets are in the playoff picture. And the Jets were never in the playoff picture, so Aaron Rodgers never came back. He still made the entire season about him, but that was just a tragic first year with the Jets. Surely the 2024 season would be way better, right? I mean, the Jets had spent the entire 2024 offseason building a team specifically designed around his needs and preferences. But what they got instead was a preview of exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers are about to experience. A masterclass in how Aaron Rodgers can systematically destroy an organization's culture, coaching staff, and front office infrastructure. First, they signed Mike Williams, a former 1,000-yard receiver coming off of an ACL injury, to pair with rising star Garrett Wilson. They completely overhauled their offensive line by signing 8-time Pro Bowler Tyron Smith and trading for Morgan Moses. They added veteran backup Tyrod Taylor and acquired pass rusher Hassan Reddick via a trade. So the 2024 season was supposed to be Aaron Rodgers' redemption story, his version of Tom Brady going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and taking another organization to a Super Bowl, who historically hasn't had tremendous Super Bowl success except for that one year with John Gruden, but instead it became a masterclass in organizational destruction. The Jets started off 2-6, with Rodgers throwing more interceptions than touchdowns in the first half of the season. His completion percentage dropped to 61.8%, the lowest of his career as a starter. But the statistics weren't even the worst part. It was how Rodgers systematically destroyed the Jets' organizational structure when things didn't go his way. The first domino fell after a miscommunication with Mike Williams during a game against the Buffalo Bills. Instead of taking responsibility for the confusion, Rodgers publicly scrutinized Williams, essentially throwing his wide receiver under the bus for a route running error.
There's two verticals, Allen's down the seam, Mike's down the red line. So I'm looking at Allen, he puts his hand up, 3 guys go with him, so I'm throwing a no look to the red line. And when I just peek my eyes back there, he's running an inbreaker. So it's got to be down the red line.
The criticism was so pointed and public, it became clear that Rodgers had lost confidence in Williams as a viable target. This public criticism of teammates revealed the toxic leadership style that would define his Jets tenure. When things went wrong, it was never Aaron Rodgers' fault. Desperate to appease their demanding quarterback, the Jets made a mid-season trade for Davante Adams, which was Rodgers' former Green Bay teammate. It was a move born out of organizational panic rather than strategic planning, and they gave up valuable draft capital to acquire a receiver who was already familiar with Rodgers' preferences and tendencies. But even adding Davante Adams couldn't stop organizational bleeding. What happened next showed just how thoroughly Aaron Rodgers could destabilize a franchise when his psychological needs weren't being met. In October, the Jets fired head coach Robert Saleh, a move that shocked the NFL world, but shouldn't have surprised anyone who understood Aaron Rodgers' history of undermining coaches. Saleh, who had been brought in to build a defensive culture and organizational stability, became another casualty in Rodgers' wake. This coaching assassination followed the exact same pattern we saw with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. When things don't go according to Aaron Rodgers' vision, coaches become expendable, regardless of their track record or organizational investment. But the New York Jets weren't done imploding. Later in that season, they also fired general manager Joe Douglas, the architect of the entire Aaron Rodgers experiment, the individual that drafted Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Sauce Gardner all in the same draft. The systematic destruction of both the head coach and general manager within a single season revealed the true cost of the Aaron Rodgers experience. Not just poor performance, but complete organizational upheaval. As the season progressed, Rodgers' body language became increasingly detached. There were multiple reports of him being disengaged with teammates and coaches, showing up late to meetings, and essentially checking out mentally while still collecting his massive paycheck. The Jets' experiment with Rodgers was officially officially over when they released him after the season, eating $35 million in dead money in the process. It was one of the most expensive mistakes in franchise history, and it left the organization completely gutted. New coach, new GM, and back at square one after 2 years of chaos. And here's the lesson the Steelers apparently didn't learn. The Jets gave Aaron Rodgers everything he could possibly want. They overhauled their offensive line, added his preferred receivers, gave him organizational deference, fired coaches and executives when things didn't work out, and even traded for his best friend mid-season. He still found ways to create chaos, undermine authority, and ultimately failed to deliver. Which brings us to where we are currently. Aaron Rodgers is holding the Pittsburgh Steelers hostage in what might be the most bizarre quarterback saga in NFL history.
Aaron Rodgers is not there on the first day of OTAs. Mandatory or not, where is your pride? Why would you not be there? Why am I supposed to take this seriously? It's not. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Forget the fact that they had Justin Fields and then they had Russ, but you're doing all of this for someone who's probably only going to play 1 year there. People think that you and I do not know that Aaron Rodgers is not officially signed. That he doesn't have to be there because he's not actually signed to the Steelers. You have this job if you don't know that Aaron is not officially there.
But this isn't just a weird offseason story. This is a culmination of nearly 2 decades of perfecting organizational manipulation techniques. And obviously, I think it's hysterical when Joy Taylor is ripping a player who's technically not on the Steelers for not being at OTAs for the Steelers. It's literally like what Aaron Rodgers did last year when he didn't show up to mandatory minicamp for the New York Jets in 2024 because of a vacation he had planned to Egypt. Now, the Steelers entered the 2025 season with a clear need at quarterback. Russell Wilson had signed with the New York Giants. Justin Fields joined the New York Jets, leaving Pittsburgh with Mason Rudolph and backup Skylar Thompson as their only options. For a team that's made the playoffs in 2024, this was an unacceptable situation. But here's where the Steelers made their first critical error. They assumed they were dealing with a normal free agent negotiation. Instead, they walked into Aaron Rodgers' laboratory, where he's been perfecting psychological manipulation techniques for 15 years. Enter Aaron Rodgers, freshly released by the New York Jets and supposedly looking for one last chance to win a Super Bowl. The fit seemed perfect. Pittsburgh had a strong defense, weapons like DK Metcalf, and a decent offensive line. The courtship began in March when Rodgers visited the Steelers facility for 6 hours of meetings with coaches and front office personnel. By all accounts, it went well. Head coach Mike Tomlin called it really productive, and there were photos of Rodgers working out with Metcalf shortly after. But these workout photos and videos weren't just innocent social media content, they were psychological warfare. Aaron Rodgers was showing the Steelers exactly what they could have while simultaneously demonstrating that he had other options and relationships. It's the same manipulation technique he perfected during his Packers holdout. But then, nothing. For over 2 months, the Steelers have been waiting on Aaron Rodgers to make a decision. They've made him a formal offer, reportedly worth around $20 million for 1 season. They've given him all the time he's asked for. They've essentially put their entire 2025 season planning on hold while waiting for him to decide if he wants to play football. The most telling moment came during the NFL draft when the Steelers, desperate for quarterback help, passed on every available signal caller until the 6th round. This wasn't just poor roster management, this was organizational paralysis. Aaron Rodgers had successfully frozen an entire franchise's decision-making process without being under contract. They didn't take Shedeur Sanders, who was available when they picked. They didn't trade up for any of the top quarterbacks. Instead, they waited until pick 184 to select Will Howard from Ohio State, a clear indication that they're still banking on Aaron Rodgers. Team owner Art Rooney II has tried to project confidence, saying he believes Rodgers is, quote-unquote, heading in our direction. But behind the scenes, there are reports of frustration within the organization. Some coaches and players are tired of the uncertainty, and there's growing concerns that Rodgers is simply enjoying the attention rather than seriously considering signing.
Either you want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler or you don't. That's simple. That's the pitch. If you want me to recruit, that's the recruiting pitch. Pittsburgh Steelers, if you want to be part of it, so be it. If you don't, no skin on my back.
The parallel to every other Aaron Rodgers situation is impossible to ignore, but there's a crucial difference. This time, he's achieved maximum manipulation with zero commitment. He's holding an organization hostage without giving them anything in return. No contract, no timeline, not even a definitive answer about his playing intentions. Head coach Mike Tomlin has built his reputation on never having a losing season in 17 years as an NFL head coach. That streak is in serious jeopardy if the Steelers enter the season with Mason Rudolph as their starting QB, even though Mike Tomlin claims that he has faith in Mason Rudolph as their starting QB. And Aaron Rodgers knows this, which means he has perfect leverage over an organization that literally cannot afford to fail. From a pure football perspective, the Steelers' decision to wait for Rodgers becomes more questionable when you examine the numbers. At 41 years old, Rodgers is no longer the elite quarterback he once was, and his recent performance suggests that he's in serious decline. His 2024 season with the Jets was statistically one of the worst of his career. His 90.5 passer rating ranked 20th among qualifying quarterbacks. Hardly elite production. More concerning is his durability. Since turning 38, Rodgers has missed significant time due to injury in 2 of 3 seasons. The Achilles injury in 2023 was followed by various smaller injuries in 2024 that affected his mobility and arm strength. But here's the most damning comparison. Remember Russell Wilson, who the Steelers allowed to walk to the New York Giants? Wilson's numbers in 2024 were significantly better than Rodgers's across virtually every meaningful metric. By letting Russell Wilson go to chase Rodgers, the Steelers chose name recognition and media attention over actual performance. The opportunity cost is staggering. While waiting for Rodgers, the Steelers have watched other teams improve their quarterback situations. The Raiders traded for Geno Smith. The Tennessee Titans selected Cam Ward in the draft. Even the Cleveland Browns, with their 4 quarterback competition, have more certainty at the position than Pittsburgh does right now. To understand why Aaron Rodgers keeps putting teams through this drama, you have to understand the psychology that drives his behavior. This is a player who has spent his entire career feeling undervalued and disrespected, despite being one of the most gifted quarterbacks in NFL history. The pattern is consistent and scientifically predictable. Rodgers creates leverage through uncertainty, then uses that leverage to gain control over his situation. He did it with the Green Bay Packers in 2021, forcing them to restructure his contract and give him more input on personnel decisions. He's doing it again with the Steelers, enjoying the power that comes from having an entire organization waiting on his decision. Sports psychologists calls this intermittent reinforcement, the idea that unpredictable rewards are more powerful than consistent ones. By keeping teams guessing about his intentions, Rodgers ensures that he remains the center of attention and maintains maximum leverage. It's the same psychological principle that makes gambling addictive, and Aaron Rodgers has turned NFL front offices who are willing to invest in him into his own personal casino. But there's a darker element to this behavior. It suggests someone who has become addicted to drama itself. Every offseason for the last 4 years has been consumed by Aaron Rodgers storylines, retirement rumors, trade demands, vaccine controversies, and conspiracy theories. It's as if he needs the chaos to feel relevant. It doesn't take a genius to know what's going on here. As you can tell from the duration of this video, this is something that we were expecting all along, which is why we gave you a brief history as to how chaotic Aaron Rodgers could be when his decision was so freaking obvious. The Pittsburgh Steelers draft strategy and passing on multiple quarterbacks and opportunities to sign a QB to their roster or draft a quarterback to their roster also indicated that they felt like Rodgers was going to be their man under center this season. And from an entertainment standpoint, I absolutely love it. I mean, in week 1, we're getting the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets, the perfect revenge game, as Justin Fields faces off against his former team, the Steelers, who never gave him a full opportunity to start once Russell Wilson was fully healthy, despite him statistically being better than Russell Wilson. And Aaron Rodgers gets to face off against the New York Jets, who released him. Rodgers also gets to face off against the Minnesota Vikings in week 4, which is significant because he wanted to sign with the Minnesota Vikings, but they opted to move forward with JJ McCarthy instead. He gets to face off against his former team, the Green Bay Packers, in week 8. He gets to face off against the Chicago Bears, a team he owns, in week 12. From an entertainment standpoint, I absolutely love this signing. But is this going to be enough to help the Pittsburgh Steelers make it into the playoffs? Personally, my prediction for the Steelers season is 9-8, and that's if Aaron Rodgers plays as terribly as he had last year. However, the Pittsburgh Steelers have something that the New York York Jets never had, and that's organizational stability. The Steelers still have a remarkable defense, and Aaron Rodgers has a true number one wide receiver in DK Metcalf that he's worked with throughout the offseason. Aaron Rodgers could shock all of us, and he could provide one of the greatest comeback seasons we've ever seen. This could be the equivalent of when Brett Favre went to Minnesota. I don't necessarily think this is the equivalent of when Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay. Or this could end in disaster, and this entire video should serve as a history lesson as to how Aaron Rodgers could easily turn good situations into disasters. Let me know which one you guys think is going to be in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.